What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg here with Ziggy, who is currently trying to give me a kiss, and he's kneading on my big fat tum. But anyway, we're here for the penultimate day of Ravnica Allegiance spoilers. A bunch of stuff got put out today. There's going to be a bunch more tomorrow. Tomorrow's the common and uncommon dump. It's going to be like 80 plus cards. We're going to sift through it tomorrow. Well, don't worry, we'll be back with you guys. But for today, we're going to cover all like 20 of the cards that they threw out. A lot of limited playable stuff in here too, but some real standard gems at the end. Well, first, let's look at Rally to Battle, which is fairly unremarkable, but still, new card. Let's get hyped. 4 mana, 3 and a white for an instant. Creatures you control get +1/+3 until end of turn. Untap those creatures. See, I told you it wasn't really too much. I guess you could make an argument for this in the Arcady Sabbath deck, but I'd say it would ultimately be a bad argument. So let's move on to Sentinel's Mark here. It's 2 mana, 1 and a white for an aura with flash. Enchanted creature gets +1/+2 in vigilance, but addendum if you cast the spell during your main phase. Enchanted creature gains lifelink until end of turn. Well, I had speculated that they would put addendum on stuff that wasn't just instants, creatures and stuff with flash. I'm kind of happy to see it here on an aura, but it doesn't look great. Sometimes you'll use this just as a combat trick and not really care about the vigilance, the lifelink. You'll just take the beating an opposing creature in combat, which is totally fine. But other times when you do want the vigilance, you do want the lifelink, this can be pretty handy. So I like the versatility on it, but I'm still not quite sure it's worth a slot in Limited. More in slightly uninspiring white cards, we also saw Sky Tether today. This is just 1 white mana for an aura. Enchanted creature has Defender, loses flying. I guess it's not too bad. Which is kind of all I have to say about it, It kind of reminds me of Demotion from the last set, but in some ways better, in some ways worse. I like how they're kind of exploring this design space, but it can still be a pretty decent card in Limited against giant flyers especially, which could be a problem in this set. So it's not terrible. It'll definitely be in your Limited sideboard as a consideration, but there's also Resolute Watchdog, which I think is actually the best of these white cards that we've gone through so far. It's pretty intriguing. Just 1 white mana for a 1/3 Hound with Defender. You can pay 1 and sacrifice Resolute Watchdog to have target creature you control gain indestructible until end of turn. I think this is way more of a consideration for the Arcady Sabbath deck if we are talking about that deck. It has Defender, so eventually it's going to be able to attack anyway. So it effectively acts as a 3/3. For 1 mana. That's obviously where you want to be, and it can protect your Arcady Sabbath if you ever need to do that, or any other important creatures. But this is a really good investment for 1 mana, and it kind of makes you wonder, do you play this or Novice Knight in that deck? I actually think this is a much better card in a lot of ways. There's also Knight of the Last Breath. It's 7 mana, 5, a white, and a black for a 4/4 giant knight. I kind of like this creature type. You can pay 3 and sacrifice another non-token creature to create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying, and this thing has Afterlife 3, so this is actually a pretty formidable threat in Sealed or something, but that is where that conversation ends. There's also Clamor Shaman, Clam Sham, right here. It's 3 mana, 2, a red for a 1/1 Goblin Shaman with Riot, and when it attacks, target creature an opponent controls can't block this turn. Well, this could have just been Frenzied Goblin, and I would have been totally cool with that. As it is, I think this is a little bit overcosted even with the Riot, Let's say you put the +1/+1 counter on it. Good job. You got a Grey Ogre or Skaze Zombies, whatever. 3 mana, 2/2, which is pretty much not good in any format, no matter what, even Limited. And I do love this ability in really, really aggressive decks, so I'm not writing it off entirely. I especially like that you can give it haste and kind of like surprise, this guy can't block this turn. So in Limited, I actually think this is probably a decent aggressive piece, but I am very wary of the stats. You thought we were done with Limited cards. No sir or ma'am, we are not. Here's Macabre Mockery right here. It's 4 mana, 2, a black and a red for an instant. Put target creature card from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield and under your control. It gets +2/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. It's an interesting take on Active Treason, but it is more expensive to not actually get a creature off the other side of the board, which is one of the cooler things about cards like Active Treason, is that they're temporary 2-for-1s. You got something off their side of the battlefield and you got something. This doesn't necessarily work that way, so it kind of takes that advantage of a card like Act away, and I don't like that either. So I'm not a huge fan, but if you have managed to, rip their amazing limited bomb off the battlefield and put it into the graveyard somehow with a removal spell or something, then this could be worth a slot. But again, a lot of things have to go right until you get the proper value out of this card for 4 mana. But here's a funky enchantment. Here's Eyes Everywhere. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. You can also pay 6 mana, 5 and a blue, to exchange control of Eyes Everywhere and target non-land permanent. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. I kind of think they could have left the word non-land off of this. As a matter of fact, some of the things I like most about this card are just the flavor. I love the art on this card. Also the flavor text and just the overall design is pretty cool. But I don't know how much I like the card itself from a gameplay perspective. I do think getting a free scry every turn is pretty neat, but this is still a do-nothing enchantment for a whole 3 mana. And you know, I don't like those. But I will say the threat of activation on this card is higher than pretty much any other card available in Standard right now. You know, it kind of keeps your opponent way off of playing big creatures. Like, this is kind of a sneaky answer for a card like Niv Mizzet when you think about it. So there are things that I kind of do like about the card, but I'm not going to sit here and say it's incredible. 6 mana is an awful lot to activate this, but by the time you can activate it, there's a lot of juicy stuff on the other side of the battlefield. Now, getting into the stuff that I find a little bit more interesting, we actually saw some pretty cool gate payoffs today. We saw Gatebreaker Ram and Gateway Sneak. Now, Gateway Sneak is 3 mana, 2 and a blue for a 1/3 Vidalcan Rogue, and when a gate enters the battlefield under your control, Sneak can't be blocked this turn, and whenever Sneak deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So it's kind of an Ophidian that can't be blocked occasionally. I traditionally like those. And then Ram is really good looking to me. This is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 2/2 sheep. Great creature type. And it gets +1/+1 for each gate you control. As long as you control 2 or more gates, Gatebreaker Ram has Vigilance and Trample. Well, usually people are used to counting sheep, but in this case we're counting gates. I actually think this card is neat. If you play it on turn 3 after, you know, your first 2 turns playing gates, then you have a 4/4 Vigilance Trample, which is actually kind of overpowered stats. And if you rip this off the top in the late-ish game, you know, if you get this on turn 6 or 7, then suddenly you have a really big dude. But we've actually got our fair share of offbeat enchantments today, too. Here's Cavalcade of Calamily. Love this name. It's 2 mana, 1 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control with power 1 or less attacks, Cavalcade deals 1 damage to the player or planeswalker that creature is attacking. Well, I kind of like this, you know. Again, there's problems with it in that it's a 2 mana enchantment that kind of sucks up an early turn in the game, but it probably doesn't when you think about it. You probably play this on like turn 4 or 5 in really low to the ground aggro decks. I mean, they have to be very low to the ground, but there's some interesting ideas, you know. I like the Tetsuko deck with this card in it. Just look at those 2 cards together for a second. That seems like a good idea. I've always liked the Tetsuko deck anyway, and I've tried to make blue-red Tetsuko a thing for a while now, and it's a deck I've been playing with for, it seems like, literally freaking forever. But there's a reason I have some faith in that budget deck, and this is a really good addition to it because it just adds on a little bit of reach. You know, that deck really needs like 6 or 7 extra damage in a lot of games. And this is exactly the kind of enchantment that can provide it for you, especially in multiples later on in the game when your 1-drops aren't very effective. This is actually a really good card to top deck, and that deck needs more good cards to top deck. So I like a few things about this, and I think it might be just the reach that deck needs to add on to its damage from Tetsuko and Mistcloak Herald, Siren Stormtamer, Fanatical Firebrand, and all of its other 1-power guys. Also note that this is a super easy way of triggering Spectacle, and that's going to be really important too. So I'm really liking the idea of a super low to the ground Izzet or Rakdos deck in the upcoming format. But let's look at Regenesis here. I'm probably more interested in this than I should be, but it's 5 mana, 3 and 2 green for an instant. Return up to 2 target permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. Hi, I'm back. Yeah, I actually picked this card to be the card that I start talking to you face to face with again, because I don't have like faith in this card, but I do think there's a lot of really cool things about it. Notably the Mirari Conjecture. You know, we've been kind of occasionally playing Nature's Spiral with the Mirari Conjecture to create loops, and with this card we can do it at instant speed and pick something else up, which might be important depending on what you've got in there. You know, Teferi is an obvious thing to want to get back from your graveyard, but there's also, you know, various lands or search for Yskantas that have been blown up, or, you know, there are things, Ixalan's Bindings, that you might want to get back at the same time. So there are definitely things I like about this card, mostly because of the instant speed. 5 mana is still an awful lot, That is so much, but it is pure card advantage that allows you to get two things back that you've either lost to removal or that you've put there on purpose. So there's a lot of applications for a card like this. We've seen Find Finality already kind of see play, and I know that's a weird comparison, but Find is one of the big reasons that card sees play at all. It is 2 mana, way easier to cast in a lot of ways, but it's also sorcery speed. This can accomplish the same goal while also allowing you to get permanent types back that Find can't allow you to get back, all at instant speed, so it might be worth the extra mana investment in the kind of deck that's holding up mana anyway. There's also Sphinx of the Guild Pact. This is just 7 colorless mana for a 5/5 Sphinx. Sphinx of the Guild Pact is all colors. It also has flying, and it has hexproof for monocolored. Okay, so it can't be hit by Cast Down, Vraska's Contempt, Ixalan's Binding, Conclave Tribunal, and it's out of Lava Coil range, but it can't be hit by Coil anyway. Fight with Fire, it's immune to... There's some cool things, I don't know, about this card. 7 mana is so much. 7 mana is way too much. There are just better ramp payoffs in a card like this, all things considered, but in Sealed, I think this is actually a really... or Limited, period. I think this is a really good payoff for a deck like Simic Ramp. That's, looking for good, uncommon, and common rarity payoffs that are kind of expensive. Like if it doesn't pick up its Hydroid Krasis or something, then this is a really, really good stand-in for that. It flies, and it has effectively hexproof from an awful lot of different cards. But up next, here's Forbidding Spirit right here. It's 3 mana, 1, a white, and a white for a 3/3 Spirit Cleric. And when it enters the battlefield, until your next turn, creatures can attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays 2 for each of those creatures. The Ghostly Prison Warden, I guess you'd call him. I really like this Enter the Battlefield trigger. Now, before I go on about this card for just a second, I want to stress that I don't think this is a good standard option, all things considered. And those things that you're considering are the cards at this mana cost, especially stuff like History of Benalia, Benalish Marshal. This card is not as good as, so if you're just looking for like how I feel about it in standard, ultimately I don't think that it has that much of a shot, but I do think we've got an interesting little, taxes deck brewing up between this and Baird and Tithe Taker and stuff. There's a cool theme running through some of these cards, and I kind of like that. It's going to be a fun, like, budgety type deck to brew up, but it might have some legs. But now we're getting into some of the better stuff today. Here's Repudiate/Replicate. Repudiate is 2 hybrid Simic mana for an instant, counter target activated ability or triggered ability. Replicate is 3 mana, 1 a green and a blue for a sorcery. Create a token that's a copy of a creature you control. So we got Stifle in Standard, and Stifle in Mono Green, too, for that matter. And actually, a Stifle ability is so good right now, period, in Standard, that I had to write down a bunch of stuff that it's good with. So don't mind me. I write things down. Hydroid Krasis, if that becomes important, then Stifle is going to be pretty good against it. Ravenous Chupacabra, that one seems obvious. Angel of Grace, possibly good to have Stifle against that Enter the Battlefield trigger. The obvious ones are any Planeswalker, especially Teferi. That seems good. But also Sagas. That's one I haven't seen too many people talk about too much, but going from chapter to chapter is a triggered ability on a Saga, so you can stifle any of those. That seems like it'd be really good against Eldritch Reborn, History of Benalia, and a bunch of other stuff in the format right now. So I like that. Also, a Vannifar is an important card in the upcoming format. A Stifle's going to be important against that as well. And it can keep like legendary lands and stuff from transforming. So that seems, that's good. So just the ability to carry around a Stifle that's sort of stapled to a stick actually seems really nice. And I haven't even talked about that second half yet. I say stapled to a stick, but it requires that you already have a creature worth copying on the battlefield, but that's not actually too hard. We're basically going to have to build Duplicate, because this gives us 8 copies of Quasi-Duplicate, basically. So if you want to build Simic Quasi-Duplicate, a good card for that deck right here, but I'm not sure how good Simic Quasi-Duplicate would be. Maybe Sultai. Sultai Quasi-Duplicate seems good. But let's have a look at Sunder Shaman. This is the last of this uncommon cycle that we'll get to see here. It's 2 red, 2 green for a 5/5 giant shaman. Yeah, you did that math right. 4 mana for a 5/5. With upside, it can't be blocked by more than 1 creature, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, restore target artifact or enchantment that player controls. 4 mana 5/5 is all you really have to say. That's a mountain. And that's a house. That's a unit in Limited right there. Just all the words for big dumb guy. This is in Limited, so I like that about it. And it's got sort of splash text. It can't be blocked by more than 1 dude, which is fine. So it can't be gang tackled, but it is really chumpable. It needs trample in order to be a truly good card and elevate it to constructed play. That said, it's all the stats. We've come a long way from Juzam Djinn, man. Like a 4-mana 5/5 with a downside, and it's one of the most iconic cards in Magic history, so maybe power creep is real. I don't think it's any doubt that power creep is real. Although I will say, I almost made a joke on Twitter earlier, and then I decided not to post it because I had better things to do. But it's like everyone's saying that power creep is real, mostly because of these kind of overpowered stats for the mana cost. But meanwhile, at Wizards, they're like, yeah, Natsuko Husk is too good for standards. I think that power creep is kind of, I don't know. I'm not too sure about it sometimes, is all I'm going to say. But in terms of the stats for the mana cost, this thing is an absolute house. Did I say that one yet? I think I may have. But anyway, it's a beast. In most formats, but I'm not sure that the stat for the mana cost ratio is enough to really carry it through to playability. Now, the last card of the day so far, at least, is Collision Colossus. Now, Collision is 2 mana, 1 and a hybrid Gruul. For instant, Collision deals 6 damage to target creature with flying. Colossus is a red and a green for an instant. Target creature gets +4/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. Well, here's an easy way to give that guy trample. all jokes aside, I actually think this might be the best card of the day. There's a reason that I put it last. I think that this is, in many sly ways, way better than it looks. First of all, just to get the second half out of the way, this is a really good combat trick. It actually is. Just 2 mana for +4/+2 is actually really good. +2 on the butt end is actually going to save a lot of creatures in combat that would otherwise die. But +4 is a huge boost on an unblocked guy. So I actually think the second half is a little bit more relevant than a lot of people say it is. But the first half is what people are going crazy about. And you can see why. For meta-dependent reasons, but those are super important reasons. This actually gives mono red a way of dealing with Niv Mizzet and Doom Whisperer for just a couple of mana, and that's super, super awesome. But even in the Gruul decks that would otherwise have access to a card like Plummet, or, I don't know, Crushing Canopy or something, which are probably better cards specifically for dealing with big flyers like Whisperer or Niv Miz, this is probably still better because it's stapled to a really, really impressive and low-cost combat trick. I'm not convinced either that it's a main board piece, don't get me wrong, but the ability to just take them by surprise and combat trick them sometimes is usually going to be welcome, even in some mid-range decks, A lot of opponents are going to think they're going to 3 from this attack, but when they die instead, you're going to be happy you have the combat trick in your deck. But that's it, folks. That's all the spoilers for today, at least. There's one more day on Friday, which is probably actually going to be the day a lot of you are watching this video. But anyway, Friday morning, they're going to dump the rest of the uncommons and commons and stuff out. It's going to be like 80-plus cards. We'll sift through it all and bring you the best. But don't leave us just because spoiler season's ending. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet. We got deck techs coming up, which you're going to want to be a part of. We've got top 25 videos, top 10 sleepers, the pre-release guide, which is always super in-depth and almost an hour long, and it's a lot of work. So stay sub to the channel or sub if you haven't done it yet so you can get all that content. Do the YouTube stuff like share, blah, blah, blah. Hit up the Patreon if you want to help your boy out. All I request is $1 a month, and you can help vote on what decks you want to see first in the upcoming deck tech season. So that's an important thing to be able to do, and it just costs you $1. So get in there and make sure that after you vote for the deck, you don't immediately cancel your patronage. Don't be that guy. But in any case, you can do that if you want to, or if you want to pre-order any of this stuff, you can hit the first link in the description. That'll take you over to my sponsors at TCG Playa. They're good people. They actually are good people that run that place. I talk to them a lot. They're fine folks, but they're real people. It's not just a massive corporate machine. And they're also the lowest price place you're going to get any of this stuff online, including sealed product, which is super low and under MSRP at this point. So just click the first link in the description. I'll take you over to Dim Boys at the TCOG player. But I'm pretty sure that's all I got for this one. Sorry Ziggy's not on the couch for the end of this video. He's actually right in front of me, staring at me, but he refuses to come over here. I don't know how I made him mad. But sorry, buddy. But in any case, I think I'm done. Just let me know how you felt about all these to finish things up down there in the sideboard. Let me know about your opinions and your thoughts, because we got to put our heads together. I'm pretty sure I'm actually done, and this is the end of the spiel. So I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.